Okay, so I want to cut out a lot of yap. Because Nightwaker is quite complex and has a very high skill ceiling, I think it makes sense to just show you what the backbone of Nightwaker looks like and give you a feel of this. So before you ask any questions or try and understand what's going on, I want you to just equip these skills on your hotbar. So the first one is Endless Flash. The second one, often referred to as Flash. The second one is Jinku's Dagger. The third one is Endless Apex. And the final one of our school skills is Soulbind Shadow, also referred to as Shadow. For the other school skill, for the other martial world skill, we're going to be using Heavenstrike Plume. So that's the red Heavenstrike. Once you've equipped all of these, I'm going to show you a very mini rotation, which will be enough to maintain your cooldowns, is around 70 to 80%, maybe around 70% of your damage, and yet will give you a very key insight into what Nightwaker feels like. So, what we're going to do is, and you're just going to memorize this, we're going to go Shadow into Basic Attack, Heavenstrike, Basic Attack, Jinku, Basic, Jinku, Basic, Jinku, Basic. And then we're going to do either Flash or Apex, Basic. So we're going to put a basic attack in between each of our skills, right? So every single skill you use here will have a basic attack. And so the idea is you will only summon your shadow once, right? But everything else will follow the same loop. Heavenstrike will always have basic attack after, then Jinku Basic, Jinku Basic, Jinku Basic. So let's see what that looks like. Soulbind Basic, Heavenstrike Basic, Jinku Basic, Jinku Basic, Jinku Basic, Flash Basic, Apex Basic. Wait, do I have auto combo on? What happened? So something happened there. I'm not even sure what. Let me try that again. 1 second. Soulbind Basic, Heavenstrike Basic, Jinku Basic, Jinku Basic, Flash Basic, Apex Basic, Apex Basic, Flash Basic. And then we go for Jade Blood to get our cooldowns. And yeah, so I just want you to get comfortable with this loop as opposed to trying to understand it. So you're gonna have a basic attack after each skill. And that's the baby rotation, because everything sort of builds on top of this. And if you don't have this right, well, good luck trying to get the rest right. So if you want to learn to play Nightwaker, the first thing I would recommend is just trying to get this baby rotation down. And yes, I know you can probably carry like another skill like Boundless or Tiger Strike without overcomplicating the rotation, right? But for now, I just want to keep it to this. I just want you guys to get an idea of what it feels like to maintain your cooldowns without using anything other than these 5 skills. So once you've done this, and once you have a good feeling of how to get 0 Shattered Shadows, I'm not sure why I messed up there, to be honest, but once you have a good feeling of how to not get Shattered Shadows by correctly weaving basic attacks in between all your skills, that's when you can start to understand Nightwaker. And yeah, I would strongly recommend just getting a feeling of this first, right? And right after that, you'll probably need to understand what's going on here, and that's probably our Everdream mechanic coming up next. Okay, so now let's start by talking about core Nightwaker. What makes Nightwaker? So this was a scuffed attempt. I just tried one pull, alright? And you might notice that your Everdream over here for me is almost 27% of my total damage. So what is Everdream? Well, it's a skill that you proc from a trait. It's a small AoE damage. I think it has a radius of 3 or something like that. And it just does damage. How does it work? Well, the way it works is that every 4 hits you can proc an Everdream. Or rather, you proc an Everdream. Now there's a key caveat to this. I'm just going to point out that caveat very simply. The key thing here is that also this was a very scuffed attempt, so it might not look that good. So the key thing here is that if you use 2 basic attacks in a row, you screw up your Everdream. So let me give you an example. How might we proc Everdream? Well, we might go Apex, Apex, Sweet Whispers, and Heavenstrike, right? Let's see if that works. Apex, Apex, Sweet Whispers, Heavenstrike. Yes, that went to Scape. That's 1 Everdream. So it goes Silver, Blade, Dream, and then Scape. So that's Silver is 1, Blade is 2, Dream is 3, and Scape is 4. So every time you hit up to 4, we proc an Everdream. Now, what you might have noticed from weaving in basic attacks in, you might notice that what we're trying to do is, because we run out of cooldowns and because we get cooldowns back using Everdream, what we try and do is we try and place a basic attack in between each of our skills. So instead of using 3 Apex and one Heavenstrike or 1 Sweet Whispers, so you can definitely go Apex, 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 Heavenstrike. Yes, you do proc your Everdream that way. However, what would be a lot more simple is to use 1 Apex, 1 Basic, 1 Apex, 1 Basic, and that's an Everdream. Because basic attack can count as a +1. So you started with Apex, right? That any skill will take you up from 0 to 1, right? Any skill. So you'll get +1. Then you can use a basic attack to jump up +1 again. So now you're at +2. However, if you use another basic attack, what's going to happen? You're going to go all the way back down to 0. So let's try that. So we're going to first demonstrate what a successful attempt looks like. Apex, Basic, Apex, Basic. Apex, Basic, Apex, Basic. So what did you see? You saw Silver, Blade, Dream, Scape, right? And that's 1 Everdream, a total of 2 now, right? Now, if I did, Apex, Apex, Basic, Basic, so that's 2 basic attacks in a row, what would you see? Well, you would see I would come back down to Silver. And what you'd crucially notice here is you would get a Shattered Shadow. You always want to have 0 Shattered Shadows. That means you didn't mess up with your basic attacks. However, this said, Shattered Shadows only show you when you're making a mistake with like double pressing basic attacks is the most common one it shows up. However, it doesn't show the number of times that you skipped a basic attack. For instance, if I went Apex, 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 Heavenstrike, like this, right? 0 Shattered Shadows, right? They didn't even show up, as you can see. However, did I miss basic attacks? Yes, I missed basic attacks. So if that's part of my core loop, that's a mistake. So the first thing you want to understand is how Everdream works, and now we've got a grasp of how it works. It's a 4-hit combo, and you basically, in order to maximize the number of Everdreams you get, in order to get our cooldowns back, we want to throw a basic attack after every skill. Alright, so we also understand that it makes up the biggest chunk of Nightwaker's damage. So yeah, I think in terms of core Nightwaker, that's what you really need to understand. I don't think there's that much more. You need to understand that Everdream really is everything. Now, there's a lot of, as I would call, surrounding technique to this, right? There's a lot of surrounding technique to how and improve your rotation and how to get better at proccing Everdream. But I'm not going to cover that just yet. I'm going to cover that in the proper opener and, you know, probably some other places. Right, so now let's talk priorities. So, assuming your shadow is up, because if it's not up, there's kind of no point in talking about this, because you should get your shadow up first. Obviously, your ultimate would be your first priority, right? If it's not, maybe you're holding off just for something, or either for Metal Cycle and Dreamlight. But assuming your shadow is up, and we're not talking about the ultimate, what becomes your priority? Dreamlight, and then Sweet Whispers, right? These two are your priority. You might be hanging on to Dreamlight for your ultimate, or vice versa, right? So just worth keeping that in mind. Right, so Dreamlight becomes your number 1 priority, then Sweet Whispers. Why? Why is Dreamlight your number 1 priority? It really enhances your attack, because this season we're all about enhancing ourselves with Dreamlight, and one of the core parts of our rotation revolves around the final hit of Cosmos being enhanced by Dreamlight, as that just makes it deal even more damage than it already deals. So outside of these two, because I kind of view them as enhancing skills, and I think they are. Yeah, they are. Outside of these two and our ultimate, the number 1 priority in our rotation is this. And this is why we learned the mini rotation, right? This is our number 1 priority. And what is this? This is our Heavenstrike into Jinka Basic combo. So yeah, this combo is really our number 1 priority. Once we have this down, then obviously we can go, you know, basic flash, basic apex, basic flash. So, but this mini thing is really the backbone of our rotation, and also why I asked you to learn this earlier. Right, so that's, I think, pretty much all there is in terms of priority. Beyond this, there's a lot of techniques you need to apply, but priority is quite simple. Your shadow must be up. You must, like, your ultimate is your most damaging skill. You need Dreamlight to enhance it. And after that, so after Dreamlight, you need Sweet Whispers. And then Heavenstrike into the Jinko combo is the number 1 priority. That does more damage than Apex, than Flash in terms of, you know, just damage, right? Okay, so I think that clarifies priority. So now let's look at one of the pieces of tech that I use quite a bit in my rotation. I don't know if others do. And this is the benefit of flash animation cancelling. I originally used it back in the good old Tiger Strike days, right? But what you can do, what you might notice is, let's assume we're going through our Heavenstrike. You will hear me spam my ultimate, and you heard how many clicks it took to get it through, right? You probably heard that. I would hope you heard that. Let's try again. You heard that, right? Now let's compare this with if we did the same thing, but we used Flash to cancel the animation. So you can see it goes through right away. After Flash, if we don't use a basic attack, we can instantly use our skill. It saves the animation, it kind of unblocks us. I'm not exactly sure how it works. I just remember that someone in the server taught me, in the Discord server, official Sword of Justice Discord server, told me about this, but yeah, I use this. Okay, so let's talk about the Dreamlight or Sweet Whispers tech, right? So you're in the middle of your rotation and you've noticed that Dreamlight has come off cooldown, but you're in the middle of Jinku. So do you just use Dreamlight when you're done with Jinku? No. What you do is you can swap a basic attack. Right, remember it goes Heavenstrike basic, Jinku basic, Jinku basic, Jinku basic. You can swap one of those basic attacks with Dreamlight and you would still have that same concept, right? So I'm just gonna summon the shadow, do basic, then Heavenstrike basic, Jinku, Dreamlight, Jinku basic, right? So let's see what that looks like. And you saw I replaced one of my basic attacks with Dreamlight, right? I'm gonna demonstrate that this is possible. It's not just here, it's also possible with using Sweet Whispers. So let's do the same thing with Sweet Whispers. Sorry, I messed up there. Sorry. I forgot I missed a basic attack. So once again, we're going to go Soulbind Shadow, basic attack, Heavenstrike, basic attack, Jinku, then Sweet Whispers, then we're going to continue our Jinku basic, right? So, as you saw, we got the Sweet Whispers, and it didn't mess up anything, right? So, yeah, this is applicable to both Dreamlight and to Sweet Whispers. However, I think you'll find yourself using it more often with Dreamlight for two reasons. Firstly, look at the cooldown length, right? That's the first reason. And the second reason is because you can't afford to wait ever. If your ultimate is about to hit with Metal Cycle, you want Dreamlight to be casted before you want Dreamlight to be off cool. You want to use Dreamlight as so that the final hit doesn't go without Dreamlight enhancing you. Okay, so that's really important. So yeah, let me give you an example of what that might look like. So perhaps you've hit your ultimate, right? So, but you're like, oh no, oh okay, I got my Dreamlight off just before it hit. So that's what it might look like, right? So yeah, I hope that helps, because this is one of the techniques. I think Goa taught me this, Goa Metrics. But there's a lot of techniques you can learn. And this is also used in the opener, where we use an Apex instead of a basic attack. Okay, so for this piece of tech that I'm gonna show, you're gonna have to start by assuming that everything is on cooldown and you have reached Blade. Everything is on cooldown, so you can't use a single skill, and you've reached Blade. So, assuming you've reached Blade, right? Like, let's suppose now everything's on cooldown. Everything. just imagine that hypothetical. What can you do? Well, from Blade, you can build up to a Dream using a basic attack, right? So let's get up to Blade and let's build it using a basic attack. We go all the way up to Dream. However, we still haven't procced our Everdream, and everything is on cooldown. I know right now it doesn't look that way, right? Because I'm just pointing out this hypothetical. But let's assume everything is on cooldown. What can you do? Well, this is where we use our Break Free skill. And as you can see, we proc an Everdream there using our Break Free skill. You can also do this in quite a funny way. You could technically even come in here and proc your Everdream like this. And people would be so confused as to how you procced that Everdream. They would have no idea. Anyway, I thought this was just some not necessarily strong advice, but situationally useful advice for people who run out of cooldowns and have used their basic attack, don't know what to do. Sometimes using your break free skill instead of holding it can be of use. So hopefully you're watching this after you've learned the baby rotation. If you haven't learned the baby rotation, well, go ahead and look at it. So what's going to happen in the opener is I'm going to use the flash tech and the trait Chasing Dreams to build up to Dream outside of combat. That means my first hit will proc an Everdream. I'm going to start with my first hit being the ultimate. It will proc an Everdream, and then I'm going to summon my shadow, use Dreamlight, go for Sweet Whispers, Heavenstrike, and then instead of doing basic attacks or anything of that sort, I'm going to go Apex Jinko, Apex Jinko, Apex Jinko. Dreamlight will ensure that the final hit of my ultimate lands enhanced, as well as Sweet Whispers, and the Metal Cycle will also help with that crit. Right, so let me just quickly show you what that looks like. And this is where I start using basic attacks. I went basic flash, and yeah. So that's very quickly what my opener looks like. As you can see over here, I'm not min-maxing for Everdreams, because going for raw damage, when we have everything ready, nothing's on cooldown, makes a lot more sense. So once again, what do? We flash and we build up to Dream outside of combat. We begin combat using ultimate with Cosmos. Then we go Soulbind, Dreamlight, Sweet Whispers, Heavenstrike, Apex Jinko, Apex Jinko, Apex Jinko, and then we do our first basic attack. And then, in my case, I might go basic flash, basic burst. Burst being Jade Blood. So let's see that again. Oops, sorry, slight mistake there. Not sure why that happened. I blame the server as usual. So yeah, let's just once again we build up to Dream. Now we use all these skills with no basic attacks, basic attack, right? And so this is sort of where my opener, what my opener looks like. So now that you understand the opener, the backbone of the rotation is pretty simple. We know the priorities. There are Heavenstrike Jinko combo is number 1 in terms of damage, then Apex is number 2 in terms of damage, then Flash. But the other part of the rotation is that we need to ensure, and this is also mentioned in the common mistakes, we need to ensure that we time our Dreamlight and Ultimate as well as Metal Cycle together. Now it's perfectly fine if you can't do this in a dungeon. Maybe at least try and anticipate the break, the boss's break. right? Because the final hit of the ultimate is a lot of damage. It's a good buff to your damage as well. So yeah, really, I'm just gonna show you a little bit of what my rotation looks like, right? Ultimate, now here's my opener, right? Opener ends basic attacks into burst. Then I'm gonna continue switching between Apex and Flash until Heavenstrike is ready. So once again, I'm gonna continue doing that. Dreamlight has the highest priority. And here I had to flash before going for Jinko. Here I'm gonna go Jade Blood because I'm running a little bit low on cooldowns. And once again, Heavenstrike has the highest priority. Dreamlight over there. I'm gonna go for Jade Blood again. And here, you saw me use the Dreamlight tech there. So this is just me trying to walk through my rotation. Sorry, I'm getting quite a bit of lag. So yeah, this might not look too good. Probably have some shadows in there as well. Like, I'm very laggy. I don't know if it's visible, but I can feel the lag. But yeah, it was incredibly laggy. I don't know. Maybe there's a bunch of Nightwakers sabotaging me teaching other Nightwakers. But I doubt it. We're a very wholesome community. And we're also the only ones who dummy. Now let's go over another piece of tech that a lot of people don't know. This is going to sound quite silly, but people don't know you can place your shadow. Yeah, that's it. People don't know you can place your shadow. Personally, I do not place my shadow, but I know you can place it. And that's the optimal way to go about doing it, at least on the dummy. So yeah, you can place your shadow and you will stay out of combat if you place your shadow. So if you place them like here, yeah, you're out of combat. You can see combat has not started. Yeah. Let's now talk about one of the mistakes I see almost every Nightwaker make, although it's a very minor mistake. It just gets to me a little bit. So before engaging the boss, or in this case the dummy, what we can do is flash and continue moving until we build up to Dream. Right now, this is due to the trait called Chasing Dreams. You can, if you just flash, right, you're gonna build up to Blade only. You will not build up to Dream. You need to move to build up to Dream. So yeah, there's that. So I highly recommend doing this because building up to Dream outside of combat means that your first hit will proc an Everdream. So you get that extra tiny DPS advantage. So I would say it's like, if you're doing 100 Everdreams, you know, this is one extra Everdream pretty much. And that's 1% of your Everdreams. Not even an extra Everdream, it's 3/4 of an Everdream. So if you've done 100 Everdreams in that encounter, 3/4 of an Everdream, yeah, it's like gonna be maybe, it's gonna be like a very, very, very tiny percentage of your damage. Yeah. Because if you assume that each Everdream, even going very lenient, 30% of the damage comes from 100 Everdreams, right? Then one Everdream is what? Is 0.3%, right? Is 0.3% damage. And So it's going to be like less than 0.3% damage. Yeah, that's still a piece of tech that can be used against the dummy for those min-maxers. Now let's talk about one of the common mistakes people make. Let me just place my shadow down. Let's say we're over here. So you can see that I didn't feel like I was in an appropriate position. Like this would be an appropriate position because the second hit of my Heavenstrike comes through the dummy. However, if the second hit of my Heavenstrike does not come through the dummy, we have a problem, right? So let me see if I can reproduce this situation. No, we're good there. Let me just see if I can reproduce this. So probably something like here, if I had to guess. Yeah, as you can see, you do end up, I mean, maybe it caught there, but there's a bit of a risk, and you'll know when you make the mistake. So this is one of the sources of DPS loss, and it's a common mistake. Sometimes it's inevitable in boss fights, but you know, you're going to try your best to try and catch that Heavenstrike. If the boss is moving all over the place, right? So you might just want to go into your burst skill, Jade Blood, right? And that way you'll kind of track the boss and the Heavenstrike will return to you. So yeah. The last mistake, and I just want to briefly mention it, is that I see people don't time their Dreamlight with the final hit of their ultimate with the metal cycle. I just want to briefly mention this because your rotation is built around two things. The priorities and keeping your cooldowns up and maximizing your Everdream, as well as hitting hard with your ultimate. These are the two concepts to your rotation. So I think just briefly mentioning that this is another common mistake. You shouldn't, it's pretty much impossible to make this mistake in the opener because your metal cycle procs right away, yeah, as you can see. So it's impossible to make that mistake in the opener, but it is possible to make that mistake otherwise. In dungeons, however, I think it's very likely you are going to make the mistake of just because of having to do mechanics, of not being able to time the three of these. However, there are moments, there are bosses where you can do it, or maybe you're skipping mechanics, yeah? So, just wanted to point that out.